So, afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're going to talk about death. Yeah. Being non-believers, we don't have the luxury of feeling content that we'll end up in some imaginary afterlife. You know, we know what's in store for us and our loved ones when the end comes. Yet for those of us who come from religious families, which is probably a lot of us, we're often on the outside looking in when it comes to end of life and all the decisions that come into that whole situation. And I know for us, if it were left up to our loved ones, we'd probably, when it's our time, if left up to them, we'll end up being in a box, surrounded by people we've never met, in a place we don't go to anymore, with someone waxing logical fallacies within sermons and hymns and stuff. Or, we've had to endure that when loved ones have passed. Sorry if I'm speaking from recent experience, having had to sit through a life celebration ceremony at a church for a family member that recently passed, and just having to bite down on my tongue so bad that I probably would have been drinking blood, in regards to how this person who I loved very much, how their death was rationalized via religion and whatnot. So yeah, we're going to talk today with some folks on how best to navigate end of life and decisions for that. And hopefully we'll come away with some tips on how to navigate those situations better. So I'd like to welcome again from this morning, I have Candace Gorham, a licensed professional counselor with a background in middle and high school education. She's on the advisory board for the Secular Therapist Project and the Clergy Project. And remotely, we have Brandi Alexander. She is the National Director of the Constituency for Compassion and Choices, and she has been with the organization for more than 10 years. So let's get into it. So my first question is why is death and the preparation for end of life a hard discussion for many people?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I wish I could be there. And I see some familiar faces just from watching earlier. So I just wanted to bid my greetings. So I can answer it first. I think, for one, talking about our own mortality can just sometimes be uncomfortable, whether it is, regardless of what your belief system is, it's not, it's not sexy. Nobody really wants to talk about end of life issues. But what I tend to say when I'm talking to people is that talking about death won't kill you. So it's like, it's a hard conversation, but it's something that we all are going to have to deal with. It's inevitable. So the more that you can do to prepare for it is what my organization, Compassionate Choices, is focused on. Because that lack of preparation makes the process even harder. So I think it's just difficult to think about not being here any longer. And I think as Black and Brown people also, sometimes life in itself is, I'm sorry, you can hear my 4-month-old in the background. Black and Brown people, sometimes life itself is hard enough. So it's like, how do you have time to even think about what your death may look like, or even want to think about dying when you're so focused on just surviving in life overall? So it's a difficult topic, but it's something that's a part of life. So I think the more that we normalize that conversation and do that preparation, it'll be a lot less scary for everyone. I didn't even have discussions with my own father, who had prostate cancer. And our family ended up fighting during his final days. And I mean, really fighting. So it's like, It's like, even if you don't talk about it, you're going to have to deal with it eventually anyway.
I would say I agree with everything Brandi just said, actually, that, you know, a big part of it is just that it's hard to talk about. People are uncomfortable thinking about their own death. I think too, she was hitting on a good point of it being difficult in the Black and brown communities. And I kind of just wonder, I don't know if there's any research for it, but I just kind of wonder if part of it, when you think about, like, you know, wealthy families, they have things that they need to prepare for, because they got to prepare wills and who stuff is going to go to, and, or, you know, maybe not even wealthy, but just, you know, not solidly middle class people, right? We got 401ks and life insurance and stuff. So we kind of sort of have to think about those things when there's a certain financial thing in place. But if you think about a lot of Black and brown communities, I mean, the research just shows we don't have that wealth. Right. A lot of us don't own a home. We don't have a home to pass down to anybody. A lot of us don't have life insurance policy. So there is no need for me to talk about it. You know, I don't have any practical reasons to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And all I need to know is I'm going to heaven. You know, everything else is going to be taken care of. And then, of course, when you have people who are actively sick, you know, especially in the Black community, part of it is I'm going to be healed. So I don't want to talk about it because I'm not going to die. I'm going to be healed. One of my homeboys just had this problem recently, and his mother just recently passed away. And that was a big issue, was trying to get her to prepare for her death. And she wouldn't, because she was still holding on to the belief that she was going to be healed. So I wonder if some of the other issues have to do with faith and what it might mean if I'm talking about my death. Does it mean I don't have enough faith? And then, like I said, just not having the practical reasons to need to prepare anyway. If I don't have anything to pass down, you know, whatever, y'all handle it when I'm gone. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think another thing is also when a lot of times, especially with Black and brown communities, we run into sudden emergencies, and sometimes those emergencies end up being tragic. So it's hard enough surviving, but then when you're caught off guard with something that just happened, you're really in no frame of mind to take on, you know, not just that this person isn't here anymore, but having to take care of everything that comes with that, like where, you know, whether they're going to be buried versus cremated, whether you're going to have a big ceremony versus a small one, things like that. And it is really difficult. And especially as a person who goes through a lot of existential crises, I have a very healthy respect for my own mortality. Sometimes a little too much respect. So thinking about our own morality, not even just of our loved ones, it's pretty heavy. So I understand why it's definitely hard for most. So
I was just going to add quickly, I think a lot of times we talk about also not only just talking to your loved ones or your circle about it, but the medical community about what it is that you want. And then that brings in the factor of how much mistrust there is with the Black and brown community and the medical community. So that's like another barrier I feel like gets in the way too when we want to talk about the end of life and what that might look like.
Yeah, and folks who have different choices versus what the family would like. You know, like let's say you have a family member and they signed one of those do not resuscitate if things, but the family member, depending on how strong or weak their belief is, they may be like, no, keep my person alive. And, you know, and it ends up going against the wishes of the person who is most affected. So yeah, that comes into play too. Speaking of that, the non-religious and non-traditional demographic are often excluded from discussions and considerations surrounding funeral ceremonies and grief counseling. Why do you think that's the case?
I think that the reason is that, you know, like I was saying in the other room, people just believe that death is a spiritual process, and that managing death has to be managed through spiritual processes. And so, if most of the world believes in an afterlife, or a good chunk of people, right? The powers that be, right, believe in the afterlife, then, they're the ones that are guiding the conversations. And so, I mean, not because they believe in it, but because, like I said, they're the powers that be, so to speak, right? In the United States, like I always say, the majority of people believe something, have some kind of spiritual belief. And a lot of that involves afterlife in some way. And so we're just not part of the conversation because historically I don't think there's been enough of us to warrant the conversation. And as we grow, as this movement grows and more people come out, then the need for the resources becomes more and more obvious. But, for a long time, people's attitude is just sort of like, whatever, I know it's going to be a funeral and there's going to be preaching and there's going to be praying. So nothing I can do about it. I'm going to just sit back and let it happen. And, but I think as the community grows, our voices will have to be heard. But I think right now, historically, it just hasn't been enough people to sort of push that conversation, to push those narratives.
Yeah, I agree with Candace. I think a lot of times there's an assumption and people assume that, you have a religious background, especially if you're Black or brown. So I think, and a lot of facilities and programs are run by religiously led, like Catholics or Lutherans. They do a lot with hospitals, and oftentimes there are mergers that you don't even know about, where your hospital has now merged with a Catholic facility. And now you are held under what they call ERDs, which are their ethical, sorry, I'm trying to keep it quiet.
That baby wannabe, she's like, they're like, I'm gonna be her.
Like, I got some info too. Ethical and religious directives, which are what their facilities are led by. So if you don't want a feeding tube, or you want something that doesn't go with what they believe in their faith, then you're almost forced into it if you're in one of those facilities. So that's one thing to consider too. But as you said, as more people are coming out, about who they are and what their beliefs are, I think there will be more opportunities for more inclusive conversations. And death doulas, I don't know if you're familiar with death doulas, but there's a real big movement, particularly among Black women, to train in the death doula field. And that, I think, has opened a lot of doors too, to help support people through end of life. So it's similar to a birth doula, but they work with you on the end of life issues. So that can be more personalized depending on what your belief systems are.
Sorry about that. I have also found that even with not just with medical institutions, even with institutions like funeral homes, and mortuaries, a lot of times they'll be run by a religious organization. So even if it's just as simple as just a viewing before, the body gets cremated, there's usually some sort of, even with the viewing, there's usually still like a religious element attached to it, just because, of the people running the establishment. It's a religious organization. So that's another, sometimes that really acts as another block to keep non-believers out of the end of life process. And I guess to fully take stock in, the process of grieving and letting go, and, and saying goodbye to loved ones. You were going to say?
Very true.
No, I wasn't going to add anything.
Oh, okay. How can better awareness, planning, and inclusion be implemented regarding death, end of life decisions, and non-religious people?
Do you want to go first, Candace?
The question was, let me make sure I understand. The question was, how do we have this conversation more? Say it again.
Yeah. How can we implement more awareness and planning and inclusion in like the into the conversation? How can we implement strategies to bring more awareness and attention and give these kind of decisions the focus that it needs?
Especially you were saying in like the non-religious community.
Yes.
I think that we have to just do more of what we're doing now. Most conferences don't have panels on death and dying. I think Compassionate Choices, that's the name of the organization, right? I've seen them at conferences before. So things like that, like tabling at conferences, I think these types of things will help to get it out. And then as more people write resources, write about the topic, that's going to make a difference as well. And I think that we as the non-believers just have to be ready and willing to speak up in our families as well. And, that requires us, each of us, initiating this change. Now we've sort of been exposed to it. We all know that there's not a whole lot of resources for non-believers. There's not a whole, if you got a very religious family, you may not even be able to guarantee that you're going to get the death, the burial or the memorial that you want.
Right.
And so I think the more we talk about those things, the more likely it is that your wishes will be honored. Everybody, my mom, dad, brother, sister, me, we've all talked about what we want. We've told our kids, exactly how we want it. I mean, we haven't sat down and made like a formal thing, but everybody knows who wants to be cremated. Everybody knows who wants to be buried. Everybody knows that I want a big party with every dessert being served. That's my favorite dessert. Like everybody knows these things. I think part of that is having that being, just having those conversations and going ahead and getting that out.
I totally agree. And of course, I'm going to say you need to formalize it. A conversation is definitely step one, and we're not even doing enough of that. So kudos for at least having your people know what it is that you want. But, knowledge is power in all different facets. So learning that information and then, like you said, having that conversation, but writing it down. And I think it's also important to start now before you're in a time of crisis, because once you're in that crisis, then everything becomes more complicated. So identify now what your values and priorities are so that can help guide your care. So, Compassionate Choices has a lot of resources online that can help you with that. And I think what 2 or 3 documents that are really relevant to this audience is our Sectarian Healthcare Directive. And so by raise of hands, I can't really see everybody, but how many people have completed their advanced directive? I'm not seeing too many hands going up.
I saw one.
Do we know what advanced directives are? Raise your hand if you know what they are. Okay, so most people know what they are. These are state-specific documents that let you write down what your wishes are in case there becomes a time where you can't speak for yourself. So it's a free document. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need anything. Some states require 2 signatures, but that document really helps you plot out what you want your journey to look like. So we have created documents. Oh my goodness. Sorry. We've created documents to go along with those, and that Sectarian Healthcare Directive is one of those. And that's basically making sure that a facility that you enter in, that they consent to not treating you with unwanted medical care. And if there's something that it's a part of their policy, that they will transfer you somewhere where you can get the care that you actually want. And we also have a rider contract so that when you join an assisted living facility, you can also confirm that they're going to, honor your wishes. And then lastly, we have a hospital visitation form, because a lot of times we come from untraditional backgrounds where our family may not be who is actually visiting, or you maybe have family that you don't want to visit you. So this gives you an opportunity to write down who you want there and sort of who has priority, and have that with your paperwork too, so that people know the type of care that you want.
I already have an idea on how I would like to be, on how I want to go, cremation. And but being with the the difficulty and just, just trying to get through another day. It's like, oh God, I don't even want to think about this because, I don't even want to just have that in my space. But it's hard, but it is something that I do have to think of eventually. And I guess it's also a bit harder because given how things are historically, with Black and brown people, a lot of times our lives end when we're younger and, suddenly, and sometimes for no reason, and a lot of times for reasons that are totally preventable. White supremacy and systemic racism sort of, try to do us in via, death by 1,000 cuts. So we have to deal with that, and dealing with that and having to think about end of life and everything. It definitely does make the conversation very hard. But I want to thank you ladies for giving your insight on this very, very important topic and very important issue. And also thanks to your job for giving also some more necessary input that we needed. So,
can I add one more thing before we go on?
Oh, absolutely. Whatever y'all would like to add, please.
Sure. So the advanced directive is specific for every state. So when you go to our website, make sure you click on your state to download it. But the part of the advanced directive is also identifying your power of attorney. And that's the person who will make those decisions for you if you can't speak for yourself. So I think in particular with this group, making sure that that person is in line with your belief system is a great way to make sure, or at least makes the chances higher that your wishes will be honored. Because a lot of times it's your default, like your spouse or maybe a sibling or a parent. Say that again.
Oh, you were breaking up a little bit. So can you just repeat that part?
Oh yeah, I was just saying sometimes legally it's your spouse or a sibling or, a family member who is the default person. And that person may not be in alignment with what your belief systems are now. So it's an opportunity for someone. It doesn't have to be a family member. It's just somebody who you trust that will fight for you and for what you want. So that's another opportunity to, have someone within your circle make those decisions for you if you can't.
Anything else to add?
I don't really have anything to say. I think, death can be such a deep, heavy topic that I just want to end with a little joke, actually. So I found this meme and it said, because you said cremation, it said, get yourself cremated and put in an hourglass and then you can still be part of family game night. That's all.
That's pretty good. Please, I'm gonna have to remember that, and especially let my mama know. Let my mama know, like, when it's time for you to go. Yes, you said you want to be cremated, or I might could put you in an hourglass instead of an urn. Keep playing with me.
Exactly. Never get the best.
Any other thoughts or comments you want to add, Brandi?
No, just I encourage everyone to visit the website and go to the End of Life Planning Resource Center. And there's just a ton of information on there to help you sort of sort out what it is that you want and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thank you very much, ladies. For everyone who is watching online, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and so that we can have our panelists answer them in real time for you right now.
This is more directed to Candace, but thank you. Compassionate choices and always very interesting. When my aunt passed, it was really intense. I basically went into shock. But the thing that really got me was feeling completely, and this is just, I guess, me and not about her, at least that's what I felt. There was no one for me. She was very religious. It was in a church. I was the only one that was just like, this is just, I don't think I've ever felt so alone. So when you're going over your book and the little pieces really resonated with me. And I'm not getting emotional. I'm not.
Even if you are, it's okay. There's a space for you here to do that.
I did not feel at all connected. So, knowing that there's a place for non-believers to get that love or to get that understanding, I really learned that then. But it is such a moment that these religious folks have like connected to. And I really couldn't. It was life. I think it did make my grief a little longer, and I'm still kind of experienced.
Mhm. Yeah, I think having community is a big deal, and we need more community, which is why I think these types of conversations are important to have. No,
Oh,
go
honey, don't
ahead.
apologize.
Mm.
Don't apologize.
And I think these types of communities are having this is important. When I was grieving the most, and I was looking into like grief therapy groups to go to, and they were all in churches, and so I ended up feeling super alone and isolated and unconnected. And I think that's why I wrote the book, so we have something, and then maybe people can form some groups around that, to start that conversation some more, because having that support is such a big deal.
Yeah. As a person, like I said, I just also recently lost a very dear family member, my younger brother, back in June. So, and while he was cremated, because that was my mom's choice, there was a religious service celebrating his life, and having to sit through that, I know what it's like to be in a room full of people, and they all knew him a bit more than I did, because, he lived down south, and I'm the only child that's, up north. But still being in a room full of people, but yet still feeling alone because you have no connection with them, it really does impact you, on top of the grief that you're already feeling of the loss. But there are people like us out there, and with talks like these and books and more organizations, I think it's a really good thing, so that we can find solidarity and feel less alone. Ready?
I think it's important, just how we have that stigma that it's something wrong with crying or grieving, or it's like embracing that process, and really being able to have that network around you that you can share how you feel. I understand that's I think regardless of what your belief system is, we often feel alone in grief, just because everyone's loss affects everyone in a different way. So I think it's great that there are environments like this, and that the more that we build community around each other, that's probably the best way to help get through those sort of situations.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from the chat. It's hard finding counseling resources post-death. Any suggestions? And is assistance like that available at Compassionate Choices as well?
Yeah, we have a consultation service at our 800 number, where you can call and talk to a counselor about whether you're a person facing end of life or a family member. And they also have referral information there. And then, so yeah, we do have that info, and that 800 number if you actually want to speak with somebody.
Yes, that's awesome. And thankfully, since I have a therapist, that being able to talk to my therapist has definitely helped me in channeling my grief, and finding ways to cope, and just understand, especially when it comes to family members, especially if the ones we loved very much. It's a forever process. you never really get over the loss of that person. It's just learning how to deal better day by day. And you're gonna have good days and you're gonna have, bad days. And either one is okay. Okay, let's see, do we have any more questions?
There was a question in here about death with dignity, which is basically also known as medical aid in dying. And so the question was, any recommendations on death with dignity information? Again, our website has a ton of info on that. And that's basically when a terminal patient decides that they would like medication to end their suffering. And so that is available in 10 states now. And so I can rattle them off, but the information's available on our website. So that's helpful for a lot of people who don't want to deal with the suffering that may come with their illness. And so that just wanted to address that issue that came up in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Also, Mandisa shared for grief, there's a site, griefbeyondbelief.org. That's also a good resource for folks, dealing with the loss of loved ones, non-religious folks.
And there's also the Secular Therapist Project that you can possibly reach out to some people.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so it looks like we have just a comment from the chat. I've gone back and forth about having my family observe my wishes after death, which is now to be buried naturally and return to the earth. But I think I came to the point to let them do what they want to do, since I'm not going to be there to see. Before death seems to be the thing to really worry about.
I think if I'm hearing her correctly, or the commenter correctly, the concern is that I had let my family know what I wanted for my death or after my death, but now I kind of don't really care about it anymore. They can do whatever they want to do because I'm not going to be here anymore. Does that sound about?
Yeah, I think that's more of a roundabout way of what they're saying.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to make sure that people get it right, because there's going to be somebody in your network who cares about that.
Yeah.
There's going to be somebody in your network who's going to be saying, no, I want the right thing, to really honor this person and really honor their wishes. And if I know you're an atheist and I let them get up there and preach you in heaven, there's probably a handful of us who are going to know the truth, and it be very disruptive to their mourning process to know that you had other wishes for yourself and they're just completely disregarded. So I think it's worth really trying to get people to respect your actual, to be able to articulate them to people and to get them to respect them. And, like Brandi is saying, use some of those legal documents or some of those, binding documents to help make that happen. As somebody who, again, has been in numerous funerals where I'm like, what y'all saying is not true about this person. That's so aggravating when you know the truth about that person, and somebody else, some minister that don't even know the person is just up there saying anything. Or even family members know stuff, but they, persist in trying to just get, push their agenda. So I think it's worth caring about it and trying to get it right and get your family to get it right.
I do too. Yeah, I agree with that as well. And sitting through my younger brother's funeral, it was very, very hard and angering to listen to statements such as, God was calling him home and all this type of stuff, especially knowing the circumstances under which he died, number one, and understanding that that's bullshit, and that 29 is way too short to be called home. And just sitting through more rationalizations of why this person that I love so much is no longer here, when I know the truth of why they're no longer here, and know how senseless that act was, and know that it didn't have to happen. It shouldn't have happened, and just sitting through this, this rationalization or just justification of some deity calling someone home when they hadn't really even begun to realize the potential that they had in their lives, and leaving so many people behind that that loved him. I couldn't help but not just feel alone, but I mostly felt really pissed off. And I know for me, I don't want to put anybody through that. Anyone else that I know who knows me, I don't want to put them through that. And I refuse to let my family get away with that. Now, however they want to mourn in their own private time is their business, but they better not have a religious ceremony for me. That's all I'm saying.
Because I'm gonna come back and haunt your ass.
Exactly. I will,
That's what I need you to understand.
I know y'all are spiritual, so I'm gonna hammer it in. I know y'all are spiritual and think that people come back in spirit or whatever. And if that is the case, watch out for me, because if y'all have a religious ceremony for me, I'm definitely haunting y'all. And in the most annoying way, like, oh, you really like this coffee mug? Oh, boom, it's gone. It's gone now. You can never get it back. Oh, you really like this? Boom, it's gone and it's never coming back. Why? Because you decided to have a religious ceremony for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you can get your wishes honored, even after death, it's important. I have a friend that recently passed away, and
I'm sorry.
she was from the LGBTQ community, and there's, her family buried her in a dress, and she would never worn a dress, and I think it was hard for us who knew her that they disregarded who she really was and did that. And we used to always say she wouldn't get caught dead in a dress, but apparently dead is when she was in a dress. So I think it's really important, especially for the people who know and love you. So.
Yes, I have a question.
Hey, Brandi and Candace, how would you respond to someone when you do approach them about the conversation about their wishes, and they say to you, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. But it's important. And it's going to be some shit after they die, because the family going to go crazy over who gets what. So you just want to know, but they push back so hard with, I don't want to talk about that. It ain't my time. I don't want to jinx it and all of that. My grandmother did that. She's gone now, and I was right. But I didn't know how to respond to that. I thought I was being the responsible adult. And I'm like, so tell me what you want, because I know these people. I know what they're going to do. And that's how she came at me. And I froze. I didn't know what to say. Yeah. What do you say to that?
That actually sort of happened to me too. My mom had an aneurysm a couple of years ago. She's still alive, but at the time, she was pretty bad off. And so the hospital was trying to get her to do like the DNR? No, not DNR. The one where you put down your thoughts. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, one of those forms. And she was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then when I took the packet in there to sit down beside her, she was just kind of like, oh, I don't feel like doing that right now. We'll do it later. And I approached her again, and it was, oh, we'll do it later. There's so much to fill out. I don't want you to have to do all that, because I was having to write everything for her and stuff. She wasn't back to functioning like that. And so eventually I just kind of left the materials laying around for her to review on her own. The truth of the matter is she's never gone back to it. But I think I might just leave the materials there for the person to get to at their own time. Maybe they're more comfortable filling it out on their own than actually having to verbally say those things. And then, maybe find somebody else in the family or a friend who you think might be able to elicit a little bit more out of them. You may have to find you a buddy to help you get that information out of them. Maybe somebody that's in their age range, because, hey, we both need to be thinking about our deaths. Maybe a family member closer to that person's age might be more suitable to have that conversation with them. So I would try to find some allies, and also just find some materials to just say, well, here, look, I know you don't want to talk about it, but here they are. You peruse them at your leisure. Something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are good tactics, and also just be persistent. I mean, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but eventually when it does happen, or if it does happen, it's going to be better for everybody else. And my mom, she already told me, as long as there's electricity, keep her plugged in. that's her desire, and I'm going to try to honor that. But I think the more, like I said, the more that you kind of just bring it up, and when there's not a crisis, and then sometimes I would say to my mom, like, do you really want such and such to do, whatever? Like, sometimes you can mention things that could happen if they don't do that, that might encourage them to do the planning. Her best friend actually just passed away, and she told us there are certain people she didn't want at the service or doing, my mom is very religious, and there was people she didn't want even singing in the choir for her. So it's like, do you want sister such and such singing at your service? Like, so I think there's ways you can bring it up where it's like, talk about the impact of not doing it, as opposed to the impact of doing it. It might be helpful too. But yeah, sometimes you got to just keep at it, because nobody really wants to talk about it, but we have to.
Thank you both.
Okay. Yeah, make sure Sister Davis don't be singing in the choir when I'm
Right.
gone.
Right.
Okay, we have a question from the chat. Most of my friends are Christians, and my best friend is going through a hard time with her mother being possibly terminally sick. As someone who has been friends with her for decades, she has kind of kept me out the loop in caring for her because I don't pray, and I've been grieving that. I am such a good friend, just as much as she's been good to me, and I want to be there, but my words of hope and wanting the best doesn't seem to be enough right now. I feel very lonely and isolated because I really want to be there. Any advice? As the only atheist in our friend group, this is the first time I've felt truly lonely.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely jump on that one. I talk about that in the book, actually. I have a whole chapter that's just dedicated to the not the people who are the support of the mourner, right? The support network. And I talk about how, for one thing, you got to do is not take it personally. Not take anything that the person, the griever, does or says or doesn't do, to just really try not to take it personally, because the distress that they're in is just a level that, if you've never been there, you can't imagine it, and I don't want it for anybody to be as bad as it was for me. And so, I went through times where I wasn't responding to people's text messages. I wasn't responding to anything that anybody was trying to give me, any kind of love or support, because I was just in a dark fog of depression and angst and despair. So I think part of it is not to take it personally, and then to just try to find out. Another thing I say in the book is live on the outskirts of that person's world. So what things can you do to influence their life without necessarily being immediately in their personal space? I can send by Uber Eats dinner to you so that you don't have to cook dinner. I can say, you know what, hey, let me come pick up your child and babysit for a couple of hours, without it being like, I know you in mourning, let me help support you in mourning. Like, find other things that you can do to support that person without maybe explicitly being in their face about the fact that I'm trying to support you. And then, at the end of the day, if they're just not accepting what you're trying to do, then you just may have to give them some space and let them come around a little bit more. But I think there are things that you could do. Like I said, you sort of exist on the outskirts of their world, and you look in and see what ways, what do you go, what's going on in your life right now, and how can I help manage some of those really practical things, rather than trying to be there and arm around the shoulder support you. Maybe I can support you in some really practical ways. Let me go take your car and fill it up with gas. I don't know, something simple, because I'm in such a fog. I might forget to fill up my gas tank, and one day I'm late to work and I'm on E. Like, I don't know, just think of something to do that doesn't require being right in their face about it. And just give them time, man. If you've never been through something, a really dark mourning process, you just can't imagine. You just can't imagine how ugly it can be.
Yeah, especially, it's a parent. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Candace answered that perfectly. That was similar to what I was going to say. And then maybe you can find words of encouragement that don't have sort of that religious undertone, where that can be helpful, regardless of where it comes from. So, but yeah, I think Candace hit the nail on the head. Find other ways to support maybe from a distance.
Okay, any more questions from you? Anyone else here have a question or a comment? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
On the internet streets. So my first book is the FBX This Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion and Others Should Too. That's my first book, both of them. On Death, Dying, and Disbelief is on for pre-order, but all of them are available at Amazon, Borders, Barnes and Nobles, all of that. Ebony Exodus is on audio, and they both will be on digital copies as well. You can find my Ebony Exodus page on Facebook at Ebony Exodus. I have a Twitter as well at Ebony Exodus. And then if you want to be extra, just random, I also do a lot of videos about hiking and stuff like that. And those are on YouTube at my name, Candace Gorham, in YouTube.
All
You
right.
know, if you want to get into the nature side of me.
I put my email address in the chat. If anybody wants some follow-up information or a presentation or anything that I can be helpful with, please feel free to reach out. And I wanted to say hi to Mandisa and thank you for the opportunity. I saw her poking in and out of the camera somewhere, but I just wanted to send my greetings to her and all of you, actually.
Do you have any social media channels that folks can follow you or the organizations on? Or
Yeah, compassionatechoices.org is the website.
okay.
And written out. I'm actually not on any social media. I recently joined LinkedIn. That's some growth for me. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Brandi Alexander. But yeah, I'm not on social media. That's probably a whole nother panel that we could have.
Yeah, trust me. Sometimes, there's only so much technology at times you can keep up with, and then the rest is just like, girl, I guess.
So yeah, reach out to me via email. I'm always checking my email. So
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for the conversation. Thanks, guys, for attending.